Hello, today is Friday, November 22nd, and welcome to episode 388 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vignan. I'm joined today by a very special lineup. NSI's Deputy Executive Director, Martha Miller, NSI CTC Fellow, Jeffrey Wells, and making her Fault Lines debut, the one, the only NSI visiting fellow, Algene Sajery. So, ladies and Jeffrey, today we are talking about the arrest warrants issued yesterday by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and a dead Hamas terrorist. The ICC warrants charge Netanyahu and Gallant with the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. The dead terrorist, on the other hand, was one of the masterminds of the worst attack against Israel in history on October 7th, but was killed by the Israelis, so his warrant would be laughable if it wasn't so absurd. The warrant for his arrest will further tarnish Netanyahu's bruised public image and significantly complicate his ability to travel internationally. It is also important to note that Israel is not a party to the ICC. While the United States is also not a signatory and therefore is not required to heed this warrant, the European Union has actually called for the warrants to be honored. In response to the court's announcement, members of both the Israeli governing coalition and the opposition party condemned the decision as anti-Semitic, and the U.S. National Security Council rejected the court's decision, throwing cold water on the ICC's jurisdiction in the case. Members of Congress have also vocally condemned the announcement and called for the passage of the Illegitimate Court Counteraction, or ICC Act, a bill introduced in May by Representatives Elise Stefanik, who has been nominated by President Trump to be the U.S. Permanent Representative of the United Nations, and Chip Roy. This act would sanction ICC officials who investigate or prosecute the United States or its allies. So, Jeffrey, you're our honorary man today. What do we make of this? Israel is the victim of the greatest terrorist attack per capita on its soil. There are still over 100 Israelis being held hostage by Hamas. Israel defends itself by neutralizing the threat to its sovereignty, and yet the ICC says that Israeli leaders are the ones committing war crimes. Please make sense of this.
Yeah, listen, a court without power is a compass without a needle, and it looks official, but it can't point the way. The intent of the ICC, I think, when it was started in the early 2000s, was to bring justice and hold accountable those who were responsible for war crimes. Unfortunately, over time that's changed, and the ICC, faces challenges akin now to those of the League of Nations. It's plagued by ineffectiveness and politicization, undermining its authority. It had a few wins for Balkan war crimes, but recently the selective prosecutions and perceived biases have already tarnished its legitimacy. And I think this, just further echoing the League's collapse as powers questioned its impartiality and disengaged. And this recent arrest warrant for Netanyahu and Gallant and a deceased member of Hamas for crimes, and only highlights the symbolic nature of the court's actions. And the polarized reactions highlighted here that you highlighted, especially identify the fading prospect of really the future of the court being able to do something, like it did with Slobodan Milosevic, holding him accountable, extraditing him, and trying him. Unfortunately, he passed away before he was held for his crimes. But I think that these scenarios are increasingly relegated to the past and are well in the rearview window. The erosion in credibility certainly deters participation, as U.S. bodies are going to continue to further distance themselves and may retreat even further from other international bodies and norms. I think the ICC here, risk irrelevance by taking these actions, heck, much like the United Nations, and it's undone by its inconsistency, its politicization, and lack of global support.
Hmm.
I think it's important, but it's being executed poorly.
Yeah. So, Algene, look, I want to get your take on this because war is really ugly and it's the innocent that, suffer the most, right? Um, it doesn't necessarily always mean that war crimes are being committed here. Would welcome your thoughts on this. How do you see this from your perspective?
Listen, for me, I think the ICC is a inherently political organization. It's a political institution, and those politics and the views of the ICC's actions as political only take attention away from the true suffering that is happening on both sides of this conflict. As a child of war, I came to the United States as a political asylee. I was 3 years old when my house was bombed. I will never forget what that experience was like as a young child, and I'll never forget what it was for half my family to live in refugee camps throughout the 90s. Right? It is devastating on the children of Israel, on the children of Gaza. And I think we need to think about that and put that first and figure out how to end this war as soon as possible, and restore a sense of compassion for those children and put that at the forefront of this debate, not politics, not posturing, and not legal maneuvers, but really put into context what this means for the next generation of Israeli children and and Palestinian children.
Hmm. So Martha, let's clearly we've seen a lot of signals coming from Congress. The Biden administration has condemned the announcement of these arrest warrants. It's not really in a position to do a lot right now. Biden is a lame duck, and there's time is ticking, right? He's only got to January to actually do something in response. If indeed he were inclined to. What does this portend for the Trump administration? What expectations do you have for how the Trump administration will respond? And not only that, but if you can get into also like what is the impact on this for the broader conflict in the Middle East?
So, I think first and foremost, I think the Trump administration would push for reinstatement or sanctions against the ICC. I think what I guess was unsurprising but also concerning is that this was yet again part of a troubling pattern of disproportionate scrutiny against Israel. This is the sort of thing that that undermines the ICC's credibility. Issuing an arrest warrant against someone who is dead versus a sitting leader of a country. Oh, and by the way, which is not a party to the ICC, which is actually against the rule of law. So, there's that piece to consider. Obviously, the Trump administration will be, highly supportive of Israel. I think the Biden administration was clearly trying to have it both ways. They were trying to support Israel while also, I think, playing a little too nice with Hamas. And Hamas, who, by the way, is probably just as guilty as anyone in terms of the civilians who've been harmed in Gaza. So I think we'll see the Trump administration. First of all, we have Elise Stefanik, who is nominated to be at the UN ambassador. She has been a stalwart supporter of Israel, and I think she will not stand for or play nice at the United Nations when it comes to some of the most egregious and outrageous claims against Israel. I mean, it's really it's become one of the most anti-Semitic organizations worldwide.
Yep.
And we seem to be the only country, maybe alongside Germany, who really stand up for Israel in that body, at least publicly. And so I think we'll see the administration supporting Israel and not questioning Israel quite as much. And, I think Israel, will be happy to end the war if they get all the hostages back, number one. Number two, who are still alive, by the way, and of those, who are still alive. And by the way, allow Israel to do what's necessary to, to satisfy its sense of security. This has been an existential threat to Israel from the beginning. We all know that the source is Iran. The Biden administration was too soft on Iran, and the Trump administration, which pulled out of the JCPOA. I think clearly the Trump administration will be tougher on Iran. And so I think I don't have any specific policy kind of prognostications here, but I think we'll see a lot of toughness, and I think the Trump administration will not put up with any pussyfooting on this matter.
All right. Well, that's all we have time for today. That is a wrap. Thanks to Devlin Burning, Claude Jennings, Alex Roosevelt, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Monday, November 25th, for our next episode of Fault Lines. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. And if you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.